Today, I'm going to be showing you all 7 medieval torture devices, and I'm going to be telling you how they were used. I hope you enjoy it, because I know I will. Alright, number 1 on the list. This is called the Pear of Suffering. Oh, wait, I hear my mom calling. Hold on, give me a second. Alright, I'm back. Sorry, I had to go check the mail. Anyway, so this is called the Pear of Suffering. And, I believe it was a French invention, but I don't know really where most of these were invented. Anyway, so what it was 4 leaves on some sort of system that would make it to where you could close this thing. And when you did that, it was used to punish, if you were a woman who committed adultery, it would get put in your vagina. If you were a man who was gay, it would go up your booter hole. And if you were a thief, it would go down your throat. And then they would release a latch, causing it to spring open like this. So it's kind of like the bear saw, the reverse bear trap from Saw. Yeah, but for your ass. This is known as the Iron Chair or the Iron Throne. Now this was should be pretty self-explanatory. Someone would be strapped in, and then they would have the boards going down their hands, their feet, their legs, so they would essentially be getting impaled by every single one of these spikes. And they would probably bleed out, because that will mess you up. Next, this had a few names, actually. It was called the Iron Cage, the Iron Coffin, the Cage of Death, and some people get it confused with the Iron Maiden, but no, this was not the Iron Maiden. It was a cage that was shaped like a person that a thief or someone of equal fuckery would be put in, and they would just be hung there, and they would be eventually eaten by birds or other animals. Just had a sip of tea. Now this one was simply called the wheel or the spike wheel, depending on who you ask. And it was a wheel, of course, with some spikes that a person would be put on this way, and their hands would be tied on either side and stretched as far as they could go. And then a man would hit their stomach or wherever is closest to a spike with a hammer, which would not only cause serious blunt force trauma, but would cause the spikes to go into their body. How could any medieval torture video be complete without the rack, possibly the most famous piece of medieval torture? Now, the rack was a sort of similar in appearance to a bed frame, but it had 4 ropes, 2 at the bottom, 2 at the top, and that your hands and feet would go into, and then they'd slowly, they'd pull this lever, which would slowly pull your arms and legs until they broke, came out of the socket, or in some cases, they would come off completely. I'd like to see that. Now this, simply, is called the head crusher, or head screwer. Its name describes exactly what it does. What would happen is that a person's head, like the top of their head would go in this cap, and then their chin would be down here, and once that was all set in place, they would tighten it until they couldn't move. And then they would continue to tighten it, obviously slowly, as most torture goes. It would first break the person's teeth, then their jaw, then their parts of their spine would break, and then finally their actual skull would start to get crushed, and they would obviously die of brain damage. Now this, is called the brass bull. And this torture device is so bad that the man who invented it was the first person to be put into it. Like, the king was just like, okay, you're going in this thing first. Now, it's a giant statue of a bull, obviously made out of brass. Now, a person's tongue would be cut off, then their hands and legs would be tied, and they'd be put inside. Then a fire would be lit underneath the bull, causing it to heat up, and the screams the person made would escape from the bull, and it would sound like the sounds a bull naturally makes. Now, like I mentioned, when the person who created this showed it to the king was so impressed yet appalled that someone could come up with something so torturous that the person who invented it was the very first person that it was used on. And those are our 7 medieval torture devices. I hope you enjoyed this video. Bye-bye and sweet screams.